Welcome back to another episode of Inside the Industry Unfiltered with myself, Adam Smith. Alongside me today, a man, I'm going to describe him as an influencer, YouTuber, podcaster, presenter, Mark Goldbridge. How are you, mate?
I'm good. Thank you for having me on. Looking forward to it.
I'm very much looking forward to this episode. Was that all right? Because you've sort of moved into we'll get into it a little bit later on, but you've moved into a bit of the mainstream now, presenting, podcasting.
Yeah, I mean, it was just on a bucket list to do a live radio show and then ended up with the Mark Goldbridge show on Talk Sport. So, take it. It's always, I think when you're in this space, if you get opportunities, you should take it and try it. And yeah, it's gone well. And
of course, you are a podcaster. Your podcast is doing very well. Can you critique our setup and background? Are you happy with this? Are there improvements we could be doing?
No, this is elite compared to mine. I mean, we do it in other people's spaces. We do it in our, remotes. So no, I'm always very impressed to get out and about and have a look at what people have got. So.
Like it. I'll take one. I'll take it. Sorry. Right. Let's start by talking about your career pre-YouTube, because you've had an amazing career in terms of the jobs that you had. You were a policeman, right? I'm right in thinking, prior to ever doing anything in the YouTube space.
Yeah. So I left school with very poor GCSEs, didn't do A-levels, sort of messed around until I was about 18, and then moved to Dublin for 3 years and worked in insurance, which was brilliant, but quite a boring job. Then moved back to the UK and was sort of like looking for something to do longer term, and my girlfriend, who's now my wife, said, why don't you try the police? Your dad was in the police. And that was a big no for me, because me and my dad have been, up and down in relationships over the years, because my mum and dad separated when I was about 7. So I sort of resented him in a way, as I think a lot of people do from divorced relationships, when you have to go to, it wasn't nothing major. It was just like I had to go there at weekends when all my mates were back home and stuff like that. So I was like, I don't want to do what he does, because I'm still quite petulant, even though I'm a man of my 40s now. Yeah. But then I was like, well, it sounds silly, but I always liked things like Inspector Morse and stuff like that. So I liked the detective side of things. So I was like, I don't want to go in uniform, but I am quite interested in problem solving and things like that. So yeah, I ended up, I was living in Birmingham at the time, so I applied for West Midlands Police and I got in. And I did it for those reasons, really. I was just interested in, being a detective.
What's the application process like to be a policeman? Like, what do you have to do?
I think it's very different now. I think because my niece was looking to do it, I think you do need like a number of qualifications, and it's all done in. So like if you're working in police in Manchester, you do all your on training in Manchester.
Right, okay.
Whereas when I did it, you went away for 12 weeks to police training college, which is what used to happen for years, and it's quite a big experience what you see there.
Yeah.
I mean, in fact, the married people are the worst.
Go on. When you
just say like literally in week 1, it was like bedroom hopping all over the place,
really?
And it was the married people who were at it.
Wow.
Mainly.
Mainly, okay.
But it was great. I mean, it was they were very strict. I mean, it wasn't the army, but literally, if you walked from one building to the canteen and you didn't have your hat on, there was these, well, I suppose teachers, whatever.
Yeah.
They'd march you in and you'd get punishments.
Really? So strict rules in terms of what you could and couldn't do.
Yeah, but they don't do that now, which I think is a bit of a shame, because it actually it gave a camaraderie and discipline that I think is really important.
Yeah, does that teach you a lot? Have you learned a lot from that period of your life? I was going to ask.
Yeah, I mean, look, the things you see, but mainly I think as people will know from my content, I'm quite cynical. And I think that's because you do have to become quite closed off, because you see so many different things. Like, you'll get sent to a house. You'll get sent to a school, and there's a 12-year-old lad there who's still at school because his mum and dad have moved out, and he's gone. He's got nowhere to go and things like that, and or dead bodies and things like that, which are obviously part of the course, or road traffic accidents, or the hardest stuff is actually probably taking statements from people, and they're pouring out victims of fraud or burglaries, or witness statements of big events and things like that. So I think you have to be quite closed off, which has probably helped in what I do now, because you've got Mark Goldbridge and then you've got me. And although it's not an act or anything like that, I think as a police officer, or if you're an fireman or ambulance, paramedics, doctors, I guarantee they're all the same, and they'd all be listening to this saying the same. You have to have that close off, because if you take it home, you're going to sink.
Yeah, I'm going to come on to that actually in the pod. That's a really interesting point you made about where you start and Mark Goldbridge ends, and the difference between that. But I just wanted to talk to you about, I mean, you just mentioned it very briefly there, but some of the things you had to experience with the statements, the road traffic incidents. I mean, you said dead bodies as well. I mean, I can only begin to imagine how difficult those moments must be. How difficult were those moments for you at the time? I mean, the first time you saw a dead body, for instance, I mean, that must just be horrific.
I think the first one was a flat, and it was a person who'd just been left there, I think, for about 3 weeks in the summer, and the smell was horrible. The decompensation, decomposing, isn't it? That's the word. But again, because you're with paramedics and you're with a couple of other colleagues, it's not like you can run off or anything. You've just got to be professional and do your job. And you probably, because whenever you see your first one, I think they used to give you a payment or something like that, or counselling or something like that. So the support network was good. And then you see a lot more. I mean, one of the worst things I ever saw was a dog attack on somebody. It's a police dog, and he bit into the back of his leg, and I never realised how hollow the back of the leg is. And it was just that was probably more gruesome than death, because I'd seen a dead body before when I went to look at my granddad when I was about 9, which I never really should have done. But so I'd seen that, and I know that I'm a firm believer that when you die, you die. What people want to do with your bodies, absolutely. If they want to take my liver, they want to chuck me in the ocean, it's absolutely fine, because it's not me anymore. But you see stuff like that, and for me that's quite normal. But obviously for people who haven't, I look back on it now and I go, I can't even really relate to probably what it was like.
Yeah, it's interesting you're saying that any person who works in the fire service, paramedic, police officer would say the same thing, that you have to detach yourself from the job because of how grueling it can be. But how easy is that to actually do in theory, when going back to that day when you've seen horrific things? I mean, how do you switch off from that?
Well, I think you've always got, it depends what you do the job for. I mean, I did the job because I wanted to make a difference. And it's funny because I think a lot of people when I did it were quite surprised, because although my dad did it on that side, my mum's obviously broke up with my dad, so she never liked him really, and never did after that. So had a resentment towards the police. When I chose to do it, I knew it was going to cause problems, and it did cause problems with friends, and it did cause problems, even now when people find out you did that, you still get all sorts of names levelled against you, which is fine. Everybody's entitled to an opinion. I can't deny that. But I did it because I wanted to make a difference. And I look at some of the things I did, and, even working on a robbery team, we had a spate of, there was a robber who was going around in the subways in Birmingham attacking women at knife point in subways. So when you're working on a case like that, even now I can feel inside, it's like, we've got to stop this, because that's horrific.
Horrific, yeah.
Anybody who's a victim of that, held at knife point for their phone, is bad enough. But, it was a spate of it. And there was a lot of stuff like that. So I worked with people that were in it because maybe they were bullied at school, or maybe it was a power trip. But for me, it was always about, I did it. I wouldn't have done it for the 10 years that I did it if I didn't think I was making a difference. That's why I did it. So,
you mentioned about your dad. How did your mum? So what was your relationship like at this time with your parents then? Because you said they went through a divorce. How did your mum react to you wanting to go in the police force?
I don't. They didn't want me to do it, but I was just sort of like, I'm 20. I think I was 23, 24 at the time, and I was like, I've had a life in Dublin that I had to leave because, I was living with a girl there, and we broke up. So I was like, I didn't feel right to stay in Dublin. So I've come back here, and I can work in insurance, but I've got to make a step now that's going to be a career path. So I looked at a few things, and I was just like, this is the one that appeals to me. And if you say I can't do it, or there's going to be an issue, then there's going to be an issue. I've just lived in Dublin for 3 years, so it's not like I've seen you every day.
Yeah,
I've got my own life. It's my own choice, and I'm going to do it. And I'd rather you did it. I'd rather you backed me on it than we have an issue with it.
I just had an interesting flashpoint of you working in insurance, just reacting to, just being on the phone, reacting to how you react to Man United games now. It just gave me a bit of a funny moment there. But insurance wasn't for you, I'm gathering.
I
couldn't get.
I spent most of my time, and they can't sack me now, but for 3 years I worked in this place in Dublin, and I used to email because the internet, it would have been the early noughties then, so the internet isn't what it is now.
Yeah.
So
a lot slower then.
Yeah. So on my weekend, I'd go on the internet and I'd find scripts of films I hadn't watched.
Right.
Email them to work, and I always forget what it is. When you flick screen.
Yes, I do know what you mean.
Control Alt or something like that.
Yeah.
I was the master at that. And I always, my desk was in a position where nobody could see it without.
Yeah, so when someone's coming, you think what they're looking at.
I'd just spend most of my time reading scripts, writing scripts. Really? That was what I used to do. Sometimes I'd go on lunch with the lads. I'd go, I have a really busy morning. I'm really stuck on this this sitcom, right? Well, you know, whether this is funny or not. And they'll be like, what are you on about? No, yeah, sorry, yeah.
I'm actually doing my job, working. Yeah. So how did you sort of go from that transition to being a police officer, dealing with all that you had to deal with, to becoming a YouTuber? I mean, where did that even come from?
It's just football, really. I spent a lot of time on forums, which people wouldn't do now. But I think there was like 606.
The fan forums,
yeah. So I'd spend loads of time on them. And I just love football. And at school, it would be, we'd just sit there playing this game, which was head to head. And my mate would go, Everton. So I'd go, Gary Stevens. And they'd go, Trevor Steven. You go, you know, Dave Watson. And it was just back and forth. I just loved football. And it wasn't exclusive to Manchester United. It was just general football, which I think a lot of people of my age would understand, because it was, you know, you had Sabutio and things like that. Yeah. So I always loved football, and I've always wanted to be involved in football. I wanted to be a footballer. And then I was just on this holiday, and I was
injury, right? Prevent you? The classic?
Which wasn't good enough.
What everyone says, isn't it?
I did, but, you know, old cliche, I did have trials. I had trials at Northampton and Peterborough, but I was a different person up until I was 16. I was quite shy and didn't really, you know, I think if I'd had the right people around me, I could have been better. But whether I'm never going to. I've got so much respect for footballers who make it.
Yeah.
You know, people say they've got a weak mentality. I'm like, they can't have a weak mentality, because I've played like at levels, and you've got to go that level, that level, that level, that level. You don't get dropped in a Man United shirt.
No. But you're saying, so you went on holiday?
Yeah, I was on holiday, lying on a lilo, and
sorry, I don't know why that made me laugh.
Yeah. The family was there. I didn't say to the wife, I need a holiday just to go and think about what I'm going to do in the YouTube.
I need a lilo on my own.
I need a lilo. And I was just thinking about, like, I didn't even know that YouTube existed in this sense. And I was just like, there must be a way on YouTube where you can go live and just talk to people. Because I was just obsessed with this forum thing where I'd write, you know, United need to do this, that, and the other. Yeah. And you have to wait 10 minutes to somebody reply. And it's just a very long process. Yes. Take all day to have a conversation that we could have in like 30 seconds.
I know what you mean.
So I was like, there must be some sort of technology now, because this would have been about 2014, where I can just get a camera and just go live and talk about football. And that's where that was born. And I started off with this soccer box idea, which was going to be, you know, just talking about general football. And then once you get, I think any YouTuber or social media person would tell you, once you've been bitten by, we'll do this once a week, you're sort of like, I'd like to do a little bit more. So I did a Man United match reaction, and it got more views than the soccer box thing, which I'm telling you now, soccer box got about 40 views, and the United reaction got about 100. Right. So I was just like, I started moving towards doing more United stuff, because obviously I you know, that's what I knew more about. And actually, I think I've always got respect for people who do general football stuff, because there's a lot more research. Yeah. And interestingly, were you still working as a police officer while you were doing this? Yeah, that's why the Mark Goldbridge name came around. Yeah, because your name isn't actually Mark Goldbridge, is it? No. So it's Brent, right? That's right, yeah. Which feels weird when people say that to me now, because I get called Mark all the time. Even coming here, it's like, Mark can have a picture, Mark can have a picture. Yeah. So I'm in that zone most of my life. In fact, I don't, you know, even you think about partners and family, not often they call you by your name, really. It's normally you. You know? Because I've known you for a while. I call you, you're in my phone as Mark. Yeah, it's the same with the people behind the cameras. Everyone's like, Mark's here. Yeah. So who actually calls you by your real name, Brent, in your life? Well, your kids call you Dad, so that's they're out. They're out. Your wife, does she call you Brent? Yeah, but only if I've done something wrong. So quite a lot. Yeah, so every day. She wouldn't call me Mark anyway. Definitely not. She would not feed that ego ever. Really? So your wife has never called you Mark Goldbridge? No. Never? No. She's really grounding, actually. She's fantastic because she just isn't in this world and will not accommodate it in any shape or form. Yeah. Like, you know, I could do any job. It really wouldn't matter. Nice. So your wife is the only person that calls you Brent. Family? Yeah. When I see them, I'm always very busy. But yeah, mother-in-law, father-in-law, people like that, they would do. Yeah. But no one would come up to the street and say, Brent, can I have a photo? That doesn't happen. No. I've had a few people who I've worked with. I don't work with them anymore. But it was almost like there's a couple of people who do this. They will call me Brent, but they met me as Mark. And I'm like, I'll let it slide because I'm really not bothered. Like, I had my surname is Italian and no one ever pronounces it correctly. Go on, give us the pronunciation. De Cesare. So Brent De Cesare is Mark Goldbridge's real name. Yeah. But so I'm not name sensitive. It doesn't bother me if people get my name. But I always found it a bit weird. It's almost like I felt they were having a bit of a power trip when they started calling me Brent. It was almost like they decided they were in the inner circle. Like, you're not. But,
So next question, Brent. What I was going to ask is that transition. How did it go down amongst your colleagues like you said, you're in a very important job as a police officer.
Yeah.
You're now doing reaction, and we've all seen your videos, very entertaining, by the way, but you're doing a completely different, I suppose it wasn't a job then, it was a hobby, but what is the reaction from your work colleagues when you started doing YouTube?
I was really conscious of it at the start, and I never told anybody. And because the growth of the United Stand and everything else I've done has been so gradual, it's been so organic. I was lucky I never had a viral video at the start where everybody sees it and they're like, "Oh, that's you." So nobody really knew. And then I left the police pretty soon after I started it because I was doing like financial investigation then, and I moved into the private sector and ended up working for a bank. And again, I kept that very, very quiet. And I remember we took on somebody new because I was working as a manager. He was like, "I know you." And I was like, "Right, you can have the job. Keep quiet."
Really?
No,
because he's seen it on YouTube. Yeah.
But I was like, "Don't tell anyone. I don't want people to know." But really, I was just concerned that people higher up might see it and go, "Yeah, we don't want that sort of thing." So I got to a point where it was starting to do well, and I was just like, "I need to do this full time because it's just a bit, I was a bit uncomfortable with, I'm always a bit uncomfortable when people go, "Oh, that's," even with family, I'm just like very dismissive of what I do. So
even now?
Yeah.
Are you?
Yeah. I wouldn't say I'm embarrassed by it, but I'm just like, when you're going mad about a goal or something like that, and then, you're down the pub with your mates or you're at a family event, and I just feel a bit cringy that they might take me for that because it's not really. That's me as a football fan. That's not me as a person. I don't get fish and chips and go, "Get these off my plate. These are cold.
Bloody
Where's
hell.
the peas?" Yeah,
He's done it again.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't do that. But I think some people probably think I do.
So when you go to a family gathering then and you're with people, your closest family, friends and family members, you don't like talking about what you can do or what you do for a living?
No, and I think that probably goes back to the police because when I was in the police, I didn't want to talk about it either. And I suppose maybe thinking about it, that might be a little bit about that. Having a job for 10 years where you just don't want to talk about it other than it's going well. Maybe it's a little bit of that. Because the people are curious. Like my father-in-law is massively curious because he's I think really interested in it. So I'll talk to him more on a technical level on, this is how we do it and it's on YouTube and how do you make your money? And it's like, well, there's ads on there and stuff like that and brand deals and all this sort of stuff. So.
But it's interesting you used the word cringe there, that you said, I think you said, I'm not embarrassed by it, but you go to family reunion, you don't like to talk about it because it makes you cringe a bit. But you should be very proud of what you've built up and everything like that. But you don't like talking to people outside of the YouTube circle about it because you feel they don't get you? Is that what you're getting at?
But even at the Sidemen event, I mean, Chunks and... I think it was Chunks and Philly who came up to me and were like, because I think that, Chunks is definitely an Arsenal fan. And I was laughing my head off at the weekend when you lost to Man United because it was right after we'd lost to Arsenal. Yeah. And I just, immediately, I was just like, brush it off. Because I'm just like, for me, that's a reaction. I don't even feel like that 20 minutes afterwards. So it's a bit, I am proud of it, but it is also a little bit, I want to be known for more than that. Yeah. The thing I'm proud about at the moment is sort of all the stuff about the refereeing. I've had a lot of good feedback on, what I've been saying about that as a non-Liverpool fan and a non-Arsenal fan about
because you're taking your Man United bias aside from that and
also it's really important
in general.
Yeah. So I'd rather that, but
than the reactions that most people see. So that's really interesting, isn't it? 'Cause a lot of people, you're quite famous, I think, from like Goldbridge Reacts. I mean, we've seen Sidemen do reactions videos to your memes and your reactions. So, but you want to be known for more than that, is what you're saying.
Well, yeah, I think everybody does, doesn't it? You want some sort of credibility. But I mean, I'll take it. I'll take what we've done. I'm very happy with it. And look, there's a lot of people who come up to you on the street and say, "I love this, I love that." And I've seen some of it back, and I do. The one that made me laugh the other week was I was watching Man United play, and Michael Oliver was the referee, and I was obviously frustrated, and I didn't have anything to say. I went, "Oh, his mum does his hair," but I wasn't aware I'd said it, and someone sent me the clip, so I was watching it almost like everyone else, even though it's sad to laugh at yourself, I was just sort of like,
you were laughing at yourself.
That was quite funny. Where did that come from? Yeah.
That your ringtone now. On your phone. When did you make the decision then to leave the police force? Because you said there you were in the police, you're doing a bit of YouTube, keeping it quiet. At what stage did you realise you had to hand your notice in, quit, and go full time? Because that's a big decision to make.
It was, and really, it comes down to the wife, really. I just remember we went out for a drink just after Christmas, and it was in my head that I was just finding it really difficult to balance everything. And I knew a drink would help, and to relax in the sense that what I was about to say. And I just said, look, give me 6 months. And I did say they've kept my job open because I was working in the bank at that time. I said, they've let me have a career break. So 6 months, I think I can make it work. And she was like, okay, but obviously she had her concerns about, mortgages and things like that. And then I just quit and I went for it for 6 months and never looked back. I mean, I did actually think I might be going back because at that time, people look at people like the sidemen and stuff and assume you're making that sort of money. Yeah. Which nobody is really. They're smashing it. But in the early days, we're probably talking a very small YouTube channel.
Yeah. And how did you grow it then? Because what I will say to you is, I look at the United Stand and think it's grown very quickly in a short space of time. There's a lot of YouTubers. We had Jack Met on, for instance, who spoke about the fact that he was doing YouTube for 7 years without earning a penny. It seems like you've grown very quickly. What do you put that down to?
Well, it's 10 years next year.
But still, where you are, I mean, how many followers have you got now?
I think it's 1.7 million.
There you go. So that's still, I would look at that as very quick growth. So what do you think you do differently, I suppose, is what I'm asking, to what other YouTubers do?
Well, it's interesting because when we started, there was a collection of YouTube channels that were putting themselves out there as fan channels. Yeah. They were owned by Fremantle. So there was a United one, there was a Spurs one, a Chelsea one.
Chelsea fan channel, yeah.
So I looked at them and they were doing really well. And it was like, they were like on 300,000 subscribers and we were starting off with like a few hundred. And I was like, I'd love to catch them. And we started to catch them basically off the fact that we were doing live content. And it was sort of, we had this tagline, real opinion for real fans, which is basically just saying what the media and everybody else doesn't, I suppose. It's just like, he's not good enough. This is what we need to do. Why has he done that? And it's sort of, it was that forum mentality. On the old fan forums were always about, real fans having opinions on who should be sold. And, this manager's probably not good enough to take us forward, which you just don't get in, from news outlets and Sky and BT and everyone like that, because obviously they've got a tradition of how they do it and they do it really, really well. You know, they have interviews with these players for a start and managers and stuff like that. And if you say that player's bad, then you're sort of cutting your legs off, aren't you? You can't do that. So I sort of adopted this, and I grew up in an era, the 90s, which I think were fantastic for football, music, but also things like TFI Friday, with Chris Evans and that. It was
a bit different.
Yeah, it was different.
So you think these mainstream medias do what they do very well, but there was a place for you to do something differently, is what you're saying?
Yeah, I think there was a gap in the market, and these fan channels that were actually owned by Fremantle, they were doing it in the way that Sky were doing it, and BBC were doing it, Football Focus were doing it. It was all very well edited, 10-minute videos. This is the preview, this is that. But it wasn't really hard hitting in the sense of the conversation you have down the pub with your mates or when I used to have at school. So we sort of tapped into that. And it was very raw, and also it was very interactive because you have your live chat there that was very basic compared to what you have now. And that's sort of where we grew. And I was just like looking at it, I was like, we will catch these channels. And then we went beyond them. And I always looked at it and I was like, why? They resented us as well. Like we were resented in the YouTube world because we were quite in the face. And not in the face in a bad way. I'd say, like, looking back at Oasis and TFI Friday with Chris Evans, that was in your face. It wasn't offensive. It was just in your face. It was like new media, wasn't it? And people just sort of dismissed it. And that was the biggest mistake they ever made because they dismissed it till it was too late. And by that time, we'd gone past them. And then suddenly you've built this platform that then everybody started doing live content. But by that time, you've already mastered it, really.
So you thought you were one of the first at that point doing live content, live streams, I suppose.
Yeah.
100%. And on that...
Certainly watch-alongs.
Yeah, exactly. And you said earlier that Chunks reacted and said he loves that reaction to a goal, that you don't talk to family members about the reactions. So it's almost like your USP is the watch-alongs and the streams. It's what you're known for. But it's that... Are there negatives associated with that you are... Everything is live and you're reacting to... particularly when your team's not doing particularly well. Did you see pros and cons to that?
Yeah, I mean, for me, when I'm watching a match, and I don't get to do it very often, but... I remember a couple of years ago, I didn't do a Man United match and we were away with family in Centre Parks and We just
great place.
Yeah,
good,
brilliant. I love it.
Brilliant with the kids. Yeah.
I want to buy a lodge somewhere and just have it permanently. I've said it to the wife. I'd happily go and stay in a lodge on my own.
Badminton at 10, Tenpin bowling at 11. The
brilliant.
Rapids. Talk to me about the Rapids.
It's a certain
unreal.
It's a certain life. Is it very middle class? I don't know. I'm not really. I'm from a working class background.
I think it's for all ages. I think it's for all classes. I think it's got something for everyone, I think.
I didn't go until I was like 35.
Wow, that is late.
And I've been like a lot, normally 2 times a year now, wherever I can.
I've divulged. Sorry. So your point was you went to Centre Parks over picking a Man United game.
Yeah. Well, it was just I think it was a family event, and we were all going to Centre Parks.
Yeah.
But Man United were playing a game while we were there, so we went down the sports bar at Centre Parks, as many people will know.
Yeah.
And it was just having a few beers, watching a match, and it was exactly the same. But you've got 3 or 4 other people with you shouting at the screen and everything like that.
Yeah.
So that's what I think a watch along is for me. It's just. But you're right. It's the problem with it is that if people don't realise that's completely and utterly on the money reaction, and I do things all the time. I even do it in my match reaction, which is after the game, but straight after the game, where the next morning I'll go, I don't really think that anymore.
Really,
I'm not that bothered about it now, you know. But it's just that live sport thing, and it's certainly football, isn't it? The reactions and emotions you go through. Are quite frustrating and elating.
Yeah, yes, that's a very good point. Actually. That sums football up, I think, in a great way. Where do you start and Mark Goldbridge end? Because you said earlier it's like difficult to separate you from both. Obviously, it's not your real name, as you said. But is it a character you portray, or is that how you watch football? And is that you being 100% real? I'm intrigued to know.
I would say that when I'm watching the match, it's 100% real. I think that. Obviously, I've been doing it for a few years now, so it's maybe heightened a little bit just out of familiarity. I mean, every Man United game I watch is on a live stream, which is quite sad in a way because I like going to United and I like watching the game with mates. But obviously, it's become what I do.
So now that's a really good point. You can never go to Old Trafford really to watch the game, or never watch a game with your mates because you're always live streaming.
Well, yeah, this is it, and this is Twitter's full of trolls, isn't it? And life's full of people who are just always trying to drag you down. But one of the things is always, he never goes to games, and I'm like, I don't go to games anymore because I do this. Well, I'd just go to a game. Would you? Would you go to a game with when 90,000 people are going to be watching you do a watch along? Would you really? Would you really do that? I tell you what, I'm comfortable with what I do. I will go back to watch Man United. I'll get a season ticket again. I'll go every week when I stop doing this, like I used to go before. But for now, I'd feel guilty as well. And I know people would probably look at that and go, what do you mean you'd feel guilty? I'm like, but there's there's tens of thousands of people watching and they enjoy it.
And also when you say watching, they are watching solely you.
Yeah. And they're interacting and they enjoy it.
Yeah.
And, even like today, coming down to London to do this, we've got a team in Manchester who will cover it. But I know there'll be a lot of people in the chat going, where's Mark? Where's Mark? Because they like that daily fix. And, we were the first to do the watch along in the way that everybody does it now.
Yeah.
And
that must make you very proud.
Yeah. And I think in this space, I'm not talking mainstream here, I'm talking YouTube football space, probably the worst space I've ever worked in relation to, nobody acknowledges anybody, everyone takes each other's ideas, but ultimately they weren't doing watch alongs before and now everybody does them. So people do it differently, and I'm all for that. The evolution of it. I just sit and do it on my own. Some people have 3 or 4 people sat doing it, but ultimately, I don't think we were the first to do it because I think you could say, what was the Sky thing where they had the 2 fans together? Yeah,
fan zone.
That was good.
That
was good, but I think we were the first in the sort of YouTube world to do it in a way that was successful. That is now
and with Man United as well. First solely on Man United. We know Man United's got a huge audience as well. I wanted to know: does it wind you up when people say you're not a real fan, you never go to games, you're not from Manchester? Does that grind on you? Because a lot of people say that, don't they?
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's because there's still this weird mentality that we have in this country, and it can be for Arsenal fans, Spurs fans, anybody, that if you're not from the area, you're not a real fan, which is incredible, really, because the reason I support Manchester United is because my granddad was obsessed with Duncan Edwards, who was part of the Busby Babes, who was from Dudley, and Sir Bobby Charlton was from the North East. And you could name the top 10 United players, and the vast majority aren't from Manchester, although we've had some good ones. So it's amazing in the modern day, with the Premier League being so diverse, that people still sort of will tap into that you're not from the area. But I suppose it doesn't bother me because it's just an easy win, isn't it? If you let people bother you, then it's an easy win. I know my story in football, and I know why I'm so passionate about it.
Because you're from around Nottingham. I used to go to Nottingham Forest, so there's a lot of people paint you with that brush that you're actually a Nottingham Forest fan. Obviously, I'm gathering that you're not by that.
No, you're not going to get that reveal.
Where does that stem from, and why do people say that? Just because you went as a kid?
I just was like, I think from the moment my mum and dad separated when I was about 6, we moved in with my mum's mum and dad, and my granddad, who got me into football, was a builder, and he built this massive house sort of on the edge of Nottinghamshire, and it was in the middle of nowhere. And we moved in after mum and dad separated. So, and then my mum was like working and stuff. So I sort of got brought up by my mum and my 2 grandparents, and he was obsessed with football, and he'd have all these videotapes of the Manchester United story and this, that, and the other. But he'd also manage his own teams. So whenever I could, I'd go with him. So I'd be around dressing rooms, the smell of deep heat and all that.
Yeah.
And I'd go to these places like in Nottingham, and there'd be like 10 pitches. And I don't know whether it goes on anymore because I don't really watch amateur football unless it's my kids. And he'd be managing and I'd be watching with the ball, but then I'd wander off to the next pitch and have a look, and you'd see a team just because they had a nice kit, and you'd see someone with a number 7 on, and you go, right, he's Brian Robson, and that's that. And in your head, it'd be Man United against Spurs or something like that. Yeah. So I suppose that's where the ability to talk about football on my own comes from. And games like Sabutio, where you're flicking them around, just this commentary in my head, living room football, stuff like that. I've always had this mind where football's just like all consuming, and I just absolutely love it. And then when mum and dad separated, my dad's a Chelsea fan, but he'd get us at the weekends, and I think he'd just take me to Forest just because it was like something to do, and he knew I liked
and
football.
Local as well.
Yeah, and obviously it's local. Because you had no internet, you had nothing on the telly. Teletext was your update and match of the day. So I don't think people can even relate to it now, because they'd go, why would you go and do that when you could be
different
at home
times.
doing that? So it's different times, And I've always looked, Solihull Moors is down the road from me. I've been to watch West Brom, Blues, Villa. I can sit and talk to anybody. I'm sure you're the same about football. Doesn't matter who they support, because you've got that common language.
Yeah, because I'm a big Spurs fan, but I live near Dorking, and I go to see Dorking Wanderers a lot, and I got into them through a bunch of amateurs, because I love my YouTube and stuff. So, and it's nice. You go Premier League grounds. I'm always a Spurs fan from day dot, but going to non-league, it gives you just such a different perspective. I mean, you can hear the players talk to each other when they take the corners. I love things like that and stuff. So I get where you're coming from. City Ground's a great ground, by the way, isn't it? I went to Uni in Loughborough around there, so I went there quite a bit. Yeah. Brilliant city, brilliant stadium.
I've not been in Nottingham for probably
Careful how much you praise it, though, because then people will think you're not.
Well, I think the last
can't win with this answer.
I think the last time I went to the City Ground was probably about 11.
Right.
About 11.
Oh, right, that long ago?
Yeah, so I went a few times between probably 8 and 11, and then never went because some of my mates from school are Forest fans, but I was just like, no, I'm a United fan. I don't want to go anymore. And I think from the age of 11, my dad stopped taking me anyway. So I was just like, I'm not going. Why would I go and watch that? Yeah. I'm staying at home with my Sabutio watching teletext.
Man United playing Sabutio. How do you react to all that? I feel like Mark Goldbridge Reacts is a huge thing on I'm going to say the internet. It's not just even restricted to one platform. You see Sidemen doing videos on it. We see memes on it. I mean, how do you react when there's such a focus on you watching football from a huge amount of people, positively and negatively? How do you react when you see your videos go so viral?
I don't really notice it now, because I think it's just, I have got no idea about TikTok. I leave that to my kids.
Right.
And my daughter will go. There was this clip the other day, actually, and she was like, you're getting absolutely rinsed on TikTok. And I was like, what are you on about? And she was like, yeah, they did this thing at the start of the Sidemen game. What are you doing? And I'm like, what are you on about? So she showed it me, and they're all going like this. Yeah. And she says, that is a thing. It's a sign. You're pointing to the sign behind you like you're pointing to a sign. I said, well, I thought that's what they meant. So they said to me outside the tunnel, can you just stand and point? Yeah. And look like, a bit moody. Yeah. So I was like, what do you want me to point at? And they said, well, it doesn't matter. So I looked behind, and there was a Sidemen sign. So I was just like that. And this is like a meme on TikTok now, where they've got like Harry and everyone else doing 3 or 4 looking really cool. And then it goes to me going, I don't know, do I? So I avoid TikTok. But like, there was an Agadoo thing on TikTok about a year ago.
I think I saw this. Yeah.
Well, a lot of kids thought I'd invented Agadoo, which I loved. I absolutely loved that. I mean, it's not great for it. You can tell you're getting old, but I was like, no. And my daughter again was like, everyone thinks you've invented Agadoo.
So that's because you've gone viral to an Agadoo music track of you moving.
We scored a goal, United, and I went, Agadoo, do. And obviously the kids of today haven't heard Agadoo, so they thought I'd invented Agadoo, which I was like,
invented Agadoo. Yeah. So there will be a generation of people that just think that is you, and not whoever wrote Agadoo. Forgive me if I don't know who that is.
There's better songs. I wouldn't mind writing Agadoo.
And the other thing I wanted to ask is, how much of what you do is scripted and how much is off the cuff? Because you do come up with some brilliant off the cuff moments when a goal goes in, particularly.
Yeah.
So do you have script? Do you have it's commentators get asked this a lot.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I was going to say that. I mean, if you look at Clive Tilsley or the good Peter Brackley, people like that, Peter Drury, sorry, they have lists and lists of stuff that they want to bring in. I think when I first started it, 100% not, and then you see a few of them go really not viral. That's not really what I'm looking for, but that people like them, and I think, well, actually, I might have a think of a few here that I'll try out. But the problem is, it's really hard. I'm not an actor, so it's really hard to naturally bring something you've thought in.
And to
also,
predict what's going to happen.
It's going to hit.
Yeah.
So a lot of it's not. I love comedy. And I love Alan Partridge, The Office, Only Fools and Horses. Absolutely love it. So I love comedy. And you know, like the mates I had, especially when I was in Dublin, it was just constant back and forth stuff like that. So it's nice to be able to bring that in. So
it's a big part of your persona.
And that probably, I'd say when I'm doing Mark Goldbridge, I tone it down a lot in real life. And I find that a little bit difficult sometimes when I know you and Loz anyway, but like when I go places, I'm always a little bit like, what are they expecting? Because they're not going to
really. So coming here today, then what were your apprehensions? Would you say?
I'm fine here because I've met you before.
Yeah.
But you know, you sometimes you go to TalkSport or you go to, you know, a mainstream or an interview, or you go to Sidemen or whatever. When I first went, and it's like, what are people actually expecting? Because I've had people say to me in the past, "Oh, actually, you're all right. I thought you were a knobhead," and it's like, I suppose that's what everybody does, but it's like, I'm not that. You can't be that person.
Does that frustrate you when people say that to you?
Yeah, I think one thing my family's always been big on is trust and respect, and I think that I can't understand people who judge people without meeting them. I really don't, because I've met so many people, especially doing this. I've met so many footballers that are my heroes, who actually, I wouldn't say they're knobheads, but they're not. You know, it's a bit disappointing. And then I've met people that you probably never thought anything about, and then you go, "What a nice person they are." Ben Foster.
Yeah, you good mates of yours. Go on, talk to me about Ben.
Just such a nice guy.
Yeah,
such a nice guy, and you know, so nice that I thought this is an act. And then you know, we've socialised and stuff like that. It's just such a nice guy, and it's so nice when you meet footballers like that.
Special relationship with him. Sorry to interrupt. You've got a really special relationship with him. You do his podcast. You regularly on videos together.
Yeah.
So how did that all come about?
Just got invited on his podcast, so there's hope for us. And got invited on his podcast, and actually it was really funny because I turned up in Leamington, and his manager Tom, who's a nice guy, came down and said, "Really sorry, you've driven down all the way down here, but he can't do it."
Wow.
I was fuming. I was like, "What?" He says, "Yeah, they had a drug test at Watford, and they take the phones off them, so he couldn't message or anything like that. So we only just found out." So then he was like really apologetic the next time we did it. So he probably made a bit of an effort, but no, we just get on, and the football side. I like people you can have a bit of banter with.
Yeah.
I mean, I did a few shows with Paul Ince, and he was the same. Like, you can have a little bit of banter with them, and you know. But I have met people where it's just a little bit, they don't want to be there. You know, how long is this going to take? I wouldn't say they're looking down at you, but they're not interested.
I know what you mean about Ben. He's very down to earth, isn't he? What's your perception of what he's created in the YouTube space? So I feel like he's a bit of a pioneer. I don't know why other players aren't doing it, because of the massive platforms they have. You'd think that they would grow very quickly online. Obviously, I know that when you're playing, your focus is on playing. But I think what Ben's done really well, and feel free to disagree if you don't agree with this, but what I think he's done so well as an individual that other people haven't in the space is he's had an amazing football career, but during his career, towards the tail end of it, he's thought about what he wants to do next, and he's incorporated YouTube, the cameras in the net, for instance, the GoPros, all of that. It's almost like he's thinking a step ahead before he retires, which is quite rare, that, isn't it? I don't know if you agree with that.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think the camera in the goal thing, I don't know whether they can do it anymore. I think it's also almost been stopped. So sorry, goalkeepers out there, you're not going to be able to do it. But no, it was ahead of the game, and it was really innovative. But I think it just comes down to most things. I mean, I get asked about it all the time. You know, how do you do this? And so many people want to do it, but you can't fake it. You literally can't fake it. I get sent stuff on YouTube where people will go, "Have you seen this Man United watch along?" And I'll turn it on, and I'll have to put my glasses on and go, "Right, that's in the same place. That's the same font. That's the same." He's screaming and shouting about this, that. I'm like, obviously he's a United stand fan, isn't he? But it won't be successful because you can't copy what other people do. And I think where Ben's unique from what I've seen is that for a professional footballer who's obviously made a lot of money out of the game, there is still that inherent family base or whatever you want to call it. Like he's still very grounded. He still lives in the area he grew up in, and his personality comes through. It's genuine. And whilst I think a lot of footballers probably think, I want to go into that world, how many footballers actually are that genuine and, you know, able to communicate on a very basic level?
He seems quite passionate about it as well. Not just like, I mean, I remember hearing him saying about he buzzes off like the thumbnail designs and the studio set up for where he does his podcast. It seems like it's a real passion project as well. It's not just like, I've finished playing football, I need something to do, but that he's actually got a real passion and interest for what he's doing. Yeah,
and I think he's in that position where he can do, you know, the things that he wants to. I mean, I sort of envy it because I do United Stand every day. And he'll be like, oh, I'm off doing a golf shoot because he wants to do a golf channel. And it's like,
cycling,
why don't you play golf? And I'm like, because I don't like doing anything I'm not good at. And everyone I know who plays golf plays it for like 6 hours, 7 days a week. So it's never happening.
Great guy and testament to what he's built up. In terms of going back to your watch-alongs then, how difficult is it doing videos almost every day, like you said? And a lot of them, especially when you started, it is you on your own. You've been, I imagine the camaraderie, the teamwork that involves in police force is you're always with a bunch of people who are all fighting for the same common goal. And they must be very rewarding in that job as well. To then go into a room where you're on your own every day, is that mentally quite challenging?
I think it is, but I've always been, I mean, I always remember one of my mates from school, he just couldn't be on his own. Like, you know, every night he's like, we're going down the park, or can I come round and play this, that and the other? And it was like the opposite of me, really, because I was like, if it was raining outside, I'd be thinking, oh, God, I haven't got to go out and play with my mates. I can just get the Sputu out in my room, you know, put a bit of music. I've always been quite happy to whack Championship Manager on and play for hours, or, you know, bit of Sputu or watch a film. Even now, I'm quite happy with my own space. And I suppose that feeds into being able to do a watch along for a few hours. But I think it also I think creatives are like it. I think a lot of creatives are like it, you know, because I think that you sort of live in your own head a lot. And I always was talking to myself. I don't think that's usual. So, and I am still talking to myself, because although there's tens of thousands of people watching, it's still that camera. I don't see them. It was nice to do some live shows this year just to actually see real people.
That's a really good point, because you're not actually seeing anyone in that moment. Even though 90,000 are watching, you're literally on your own.
Yeah. So I'm quite comfortable with it. It's probably a little bit odd. I don't know. But, you know, living room football when no one's in the house. I mean, I'd still do it now if I could. Yeah. You know, I've got a pool table in the back garden. I'll go and play. People go, how do you play pool on your own? I'm like, well, it's not. It's Hendry against O'Sullivan. It's just in my head.
Wow.
I'm just playing the game.
You're doing the commentary as you're going?
Yeah. I'll do it even after the game. I'll try and do a Stephen Hendry impression and go, you know, that's a great player, you know.
Go on, give us one.
I can't do it. That's it. Great player.
Where's he from? Yeah, that's not bad. And do you have does Mark Goldbridge have a favourite Mark Goldbridge reacts or favourite meme? There's so many that have done the rounds.
I like the line. I like the over the line one, because it was just. It was
Go on, remind us of that. It was
so I was playing a game of FIFA. It was Man United against Everton, and I think Everton had scored.
It's not over the line,
and they'd shown it, and it was like not over the line. I was saying, look at the white bit, it's not over the line, and it stayed there for ages, and then they moved it, and I was like, well, what did you show me that for? And it's just like, I still find it funny now if I don't watch it for a few months, because I was like, to be live doing that. And then to move the ball, I got completely and utterly mugged off by FIFA, but it was funny.
That has done the rounds many occasions on Twitter, I've seen as well. You've sort of moved into the mainstream now as well, which is interesting, because you've spoken about you being very different from the mainstream in terms of you wanting to interact with fans and looking at it from a fan's perspective. You've now got your own show on TalkSport, which is called The Mark Goldbridge Show.
Yeah, it's amazing, really. Yeah. And that I've got to say that it's completely down to the guy at TalkSport at the time who had the foresight to do it. I mean, he's not there anymore. He left last year, but he got us in for a chat, and he was like, "Look, I think there's something that can happen here between you know, because TalkSport would be considered mainstream, and obviously we'd be YouTube, and it was like, I really think that." You know, we're constantly just getting ex-players, and we've got the same sort of presenters, and I think there's something that we can do. And he let me present a show with Carlton Cole on a Friday night, which I absolutely loved, in the studio, and they were pleased with it. And they were like, "What else can we do?" And it was like, "Well, what about the Saturday night show from 7:30 till 9?" I was like, "What, straight after the 5:30 game?" They're like, "Yeah," and I was like, "Yeah." And that was it. And I was just like, this is brilliant. Absolutely love it. You know, because it's literally taking calls from fans. A lot of them driving home. I absolutely love it. I mean, for me, that's it's one of the best things I've done, because it's presenting a show with fans calling in, talking about football, and it's great.
Do you find you have to change your persona or opinion slightly when you are working in mainstream? Because obviously you're very passionate, very reactive, very opinionated, I'd say as well, online and in your reactive videos, which is why you've gone on to be so successful, because people love watching you. But then when you're working for someone else, do you have to change slightly at all?
Oh yeah,
what are the differences? Give us some examples.
Well, it's respect, I suppose. It goes back to that, isn't it? It's not my platform. If I sit there on That's Football or United stand and I want to go in on a refereeing decision or the PGMOL or whatever, then I can do it safe in the knowledge that if it backfires, then it's going to be on me, and I take that responsibility. But if I'm on Sky or TalkSport, then that, effectively you're doing a job for somebody else and they built their reputation up, and it's not my place to start swearing or doing something that I know is probably going to cause issues.
And in terms of trolls as well, because you've got an incredible fan base. I mean, anything that you put on Twitter or X now, Instagram, gets huge engagement, but you do get some skeptics as well, I think it's fair to say. How do you deal with the negativity or the trolls? Because sadly there are a lot on those platforms. Does that affect you mentally? Do you brush it under the carpet? How does that affect your sort of day-to-day?
I think it affected me a lot at the start. There was numerous times at the start where I just thought I would stop it, because the mental strain was just too much. It was really difficult, because I'd never worked in a space that prepared me for that, even though, you talk about policing and, family events that are quite traumatic, but there's nothing quite like being on a social media platform. And then I remember there was a person from another YouTube channel, and I woke up on Christmas morning and somebody had said, "Have you seen this?" And it was like, I woke up this morning, got the presents I wanted, but didn't get the one I really wanted. Mark Goldbridge dead. And I was like, we don't know each other. He doesn't like me, so it's not banter. And it was like, that messed with my head, even though now I just laugh at it. But it messed with my head, because I was like, well, he knows I've got kids and stuff. It's just not a nice thing to say. But you get way more than that. So I went through the sort of training, I suppose, of how do you deal with that? Do you stop doing it or do you carry on? And it's probably a lot worse now, but I don't take any notice of it. Like every now and again, people will say, "Have you seen this? Have you seen that?" But I'm like, ultimately in life, I suppose my past helped, because there are people in life who do horrible things. You can't justify it. We see it on the news all the time. The problem people have is trying to comprehend it and understand it, and you never will. There's people out there who will do horrific things, and there's people on social media who will say horrific things. And ultimately, I choose to focus on the good people, and there's a lot of good people who know who I really am. And if people want to tell lies about me and say bad stuff about me, and a lot of people on social media believe anything as well. They'll believe that that you're a Forest fan, or they'll believe that you've sacked somebody because you're greedy or anything like that. They'll believe it. And if they want to believe it, that's up to them. Yeah,
interesting that you said there that it got so bad that you thought about quitting at one point. Was that just because of the place that you were in mentally then at that time?
Yeah, I think I still get it now. I sort of get these. I describe it as waking up and thinking you haven't done your homework, which I used to have when I was a kid. Waking
when you hadn't actually done your homework. Yeah.
And I was just. I think it carried through life, and I was just getting to this point where I was just waking up, thinking things had happened that hadn't happened, and I was like, you can almost feel the tension in your chest, and I was like, this is not good. I was getting very, very stressed, and I actually remember I was working still at the bank, and there was some stuff going on. I think it was when my real name got released as well, which was quite a big thing at the time. Even now, I laugh at it when someone's like, his real name's this, and I was like, I just found it all very stressful, and I was just like, I don't really need to do this. I can go and I've got a professional qualifications.
Yeah, job.
But then I was just sort of like, the stubbornness came through of, I really like, what, you're not going to not talk about football. You've got a bit of a platform. Why should you walk away?
And in terms of where the stress came from, is that because people think that you're someone that you're not with regards to the name? What exactly was that a stressful moment?
I just think it was dealing with the fact that people were saying horrible things about you and your family, and what they'd like to do to you and stuff like that. And I just think they don't know me. It's weird. I just found it a little bit weird.
Yeah.
When first getting used to that.
How is your mental health now? And is it something that you've just come to terms with, or actually does it still affect you like it did back then?
I think in the general sense of the trolls, it doesn't massively bother me. I just think day to day, mental health is obviously something that's more prominent now. And I think that it does still have an impact on me, but I always have this, I have a bit of a, and I think a lot, you know, the big thing is to talk about it, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I think I have a guilt trip towards it, because I'll have people who message me, especially through COVID and even now, they love the community, whether it's That's Football or the podcast or whatever. They just love the community feel, because I think the way we do the content is we always try and involve people. And I think, you know, through things like COVID, or you'll get people messaging you saying my dad's dying or he's got cancer and this is just escapism, and you'll never know how much it's helped my mental health, which is absolutely fantastic. And I'll always acknowledge it, and I'll say that's great to talk, and you know, this is really important. But my own mental health, I don't really talk about it, because I just have this, like, I don't think I could ever talk about it, certainly couldn't tweet about it, because it's almost like a guilt trip, because I feel like if I go, you know, I do find it really difficult sometimes. You know, most mornings I wake up and I just don't feel good, because people will go, yeah, but you slag Harry Maguire off, you know, you slag this off, you slag that off. And it's like, I don't feel I can talk about it in that sense. Although I do talk about generally mental health, because I think that, you know, it's fantastic the amount that people can do for that.
Yeah, I agree. It's interesting that you say that you feel like you can't talk about it, because the one thing about mental health is it doesn't discriminate against anyone from any walk of life can have those issues. I've been very open myself about the issues that I've had in the past. So do you wake up now and you still have really bad moments, do you? And a lot of that is brought on by the negativity directed towards you at times. Is that right? I
think I've always had it. I think I've always had some sort of depressive thoughts. I wake up I've joked about it on streams about, you know, do you argue with yourself in the shower in the morning? Because I've always done it.
Really?
Even back like when I was living in Dublin, I had to go training after work, and I'd be like, I'm not going, just not going. In fact, I might not go to work. And it's this conversation in my head. Yeah. I very rarely wake up in the morning and I'm not in a great mood. And I'm sure a lot of people would empathize with that, but it's not tiredness. You know, it's just I don't know. It's just a bit of a cloud that I've always had. And I think that because as a creative, I think a lot of people struggle with it. As a creative, you're always going to come up with ideas, but my mind wanders into terrible places as well. Not that I'm going to do anything. I'm not about to reveal anything like that, but I just think, you know, I can get thinking about something and I cannot change my mind about it. And that's quite a negative pull on you anyway. And I think that's like when we go back to what the stuff at Twitter at the start, I think the mind probably wandered away from, I'd love 5 minutes in a room with Goldbridge, to, you know, what they're going to do, tie me up and, you know, stick pins in my eyes and stuff like that, because that's just the way a creative mind works. Do
you think a lot of that stems back, because you've been very honest in this pod of talking about your parents' divorce, and then when you're in the police force, seeing dead bodies and some of the horrific things that you've seen, and the trolling that you get. Do you think all of that has maybe taken its toll on you, or is a lot of that in the past?
I think everybody's scarred by the events of the past, isn't there? You know, I mean, in no way, shape or form am I saying it's anything the same as soldiers who go to war and then come back with PTSD. But I think everybody is impacted on their past. You know, I didn't like my mum and dad separating because it disrupted my life, and, you know, there was two different families and you're sort of stuck in the middle, you know, having to go away at weekends when you wanted to be back at home playing football and stuff with your mates. But yeah, I think it's great to talk about it. But as I said, I just feel a bit like I've sort of created this space where I can't, because if I go and try and open up about it and say these things bother me, people either go, well, you're really successful, which is obviously what, you know, we were talking about this off camera, weren't we? Like footballers can be depressed, and people might go, yeah, but you earn hundreds of thousands of pounds a week. Or people will go, well, you know what? It's all right you saying playing for a bit of sympathy, but you're there slagging off United players every week. And I'm like, well, I don't personalise it. I never have personalised it. And also, so you can't feel down and depressed because you are critical of somebody else. I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me.
Have you taken any steps, or have you spoken to anyone about it? What do you do to help yourself and improve your mental health?
I actually think, well, talking to people is really important. I remember having a bit of counselling or therapy session when I was in my early 20s about something. I can't remember what it was. And I found it really useful. I mean, I think I was on the verge of tears because they were talking about like my upbringing and stuff. And that wasn't because anything traumatic had happened, but it was just the ability to sit and talk to people. And I think talking to somebody who's like, you know, probably doesn't know you. Yeah, I think it's a really powerful thing. But as I say, I don't do it because in my home life, I wouldn't want to do it because I just feel like I still think there's that old cliche of, it's a weakness. And I think in my professional life, I just feel like people would just throw it back at you.
And how do you find it now? You said that you look back on it, laugh. Are you mentally in a better place now because you're used to it? I mean, obviously, when they mention your family, that's just horrific. There's no need for that. But are you in a better place now because you're used to it? Is that, or you've overcome it? What do you put that down to?
I'd say it's a lot worse now. I just don't go.
Really?
I don't go looking for it. Every now and again, you'll see it. But you've also got to take into account that some people unfortunately live bitter lives, don't they? And a lot of it will come down to jealousy. I mean, look, the success of my story is that anybody could have done it, but not a lot of people do it. And that's down to them. That's not down to me. So they'll look at it and go, why are people listening to him? Because I haven't played the game, and I didn't go to university to become a journalist, and people probably think, well, who's he to do this? Well, you could have done it yourself. It's not.
Well, what do you say to those people when they do say that? Because that is something that we have heard. And do you think that's unfair? What do you reply back, or do you just ignore messages like that?
What in relation to
in terms of people saying, how's he done this? He'd never played the game. He's not from Manchester. He's not. People saying you're a Nottingham Forest fan. The things that you've said that are false narratives, I would suppose. So particularly with the Nottingham Forest, you're not a Forest fan. Do you reply to them? Do you ignore them? How do you account for those?
You can't reply to it because then you've given them what they want, and you can't reason with these people. I would have tried years ago, but you can't reason with them. They just won't come from a place of logic. It's like, you can't argue with an idiot because they're very experienced in it. And, I don't think I am an idiot. So I don't as I'm sure most people aren't. But I think with regards to, you're a fake fan, you're doing it for money, this, that, and the other. Well, my background in football is clear to me. I'm absolutely passionate about it. I actually think football's a really simple game. I think it gets overcompensated by people, overcomplicated. I don't think it's difficult at all. I don't think you need to have played the game. I played five-a-side for most of my life. I've played football most of my life. I know what a bad tackle is. I've done some, I've received some. Yeah. You don't need to play in the Premier League and have 100 England caps to know what a bad tackle is. The only thing they can tell you is what it's like in the dressing room and what it's like to be rich playing football, which I'm probably quite interested in knowing that story, but I don't think you've got a magic pass as a journalist or an ex-player to tell people about football. In fact, I would argue that most football fans probably watch more football than them, if not the same.
Okay, and your new podcast, we've got to give a shout out to that. Goldbridge Saves Football, smashing it regularly in the top 5 in the podcast charts. And I look at it. In terms of how that came about, was that easier to grow now that you're at a level? So obviously we're trying to grow a podcast here. So you got any advice?
Well, it's like Sidemen Eats, isn't it? They have the Sidemen, so they go and do that. And I suppose in a very small way, the podcast was like that. Loads of people had said, do a podcast. I like podcasts. I listen to a lot of podcasts. It's a very different platform, isn't it? Because you can just put your headphones in, go for a walk or a run or whatever. And loads of people had said, do a podcast, but I just wanted it to be the right thing. I didn't want to do a Manchester United podcast. I wanted it to be general football, but I didn't want it to be like a lot of people do, which is just a review of the weekend. So I always had a few ideas of aspects I wanted to bring into it. And me and Will Brazier sort of met through Ben Foster, actually.
Great guy, Will.
And we just clicked in relation to similar interests and obviously passionate about football, but, same sort of personalities and banter. And we tried it out and it's gone really well. I really enjoy doing it. And then obviously you say you're doing a podcast, and because you've got an audience, some people go and listen to it, and that therefore you drop in, and it's doing quite well. Yeah,
and it's interesting you say your love of comedy there. You've mentioned that a few times, and Will, you share the same love with Will. You've mentioned Only Fools and Horses. You've mentioned Alan Partridge, The Office. Is there a bit of, because a lot of people brush you with the David Brent card, don't they, a little bit? Do you take inspiration from the Alan Partridges, the David Brents of this world when you are in front of camera or not?
I think it's more of a natural thing. A lot of my friends, we just, it's almost like you're writing an Office episode or a Partridge episode because you sort of drop into that mentality of those comedies. So you sort of come up with those Partridgeisms or Brentisms. So I think if anyone watches Only Fools and Horses, they'd probably say, oh, he's a little bit there's stuff there, because I definitely do that. I just think if you watch something enough, it becomes a little bit a part of you.
Yeah.
And there are certain comedies out there like Mrs. Brown's Boys. I'm never going to do anything about that because I can't stand it. So they do become part of you, and they become part of your personality. I suppose it's like reading books, isn't it? And watching football, and you do get shaped by the things that you like.
Yeah. Another thing that you've done recently, Sidemen charity match. You were the gaffer for the YouTube All Stars. Tell me about that experience. I know that you've spoken about it, but any stories that you haven't told? And I'm interested to know it from your point of view, that perspective of getting the call for the first time and actually doing that team talk in front of some of the most famous influencers, not just in this country, but obviously ones from abroad as well. Like, how were you? Were you nervous, anxious? How was that whole experience for you both times? Because it's a big gig, that, isn't it, on a huge platform?
I think the second time was not nervous at all. I just wanted to enjoy
really?
it. The first one was at Charlton, 30,000 fans, and I was just like, I've never played. I didn't play, but like even being a manager in front of 30,000 people was just, and it was very close at Charlton.
Yeah.
So that was just a massive insight as to what it must be like for a player to play, because you sort of block that crowd out. Like, I couldn't believe how I just didn't notice the crowd
really
once the game kicked off, and it must be the same if you're playing. But no, I sort of got dropped in quite late to that. I don't know whether I was a late substitute as a manager last time.
Up.
I think they did, because I found out about a week before, and I barely had time to get the suit ready, and I didn't really know anybody in that space really, and they were all really nice, but I'd not met a lot of them. So you go into I booked into the hotel in the morning, and then fair play, Nico and Chunks, they invited me up to the room to sort of like meet them lot, and they're probably doing it so I'd pick them or something like that. I don't know. So they would, and they did it again this year. So I think that we can take that as genuine. But they were really sound. And then you go in the dressing room, and the hardest thing is not knowing who most of them are.
That was the hardest part of it, was it?
Because like this year I did it as well, and there was a couple of people that I just didn't know who they were. And after it, my daughter's going, do you realise they've got like this many million and this many million?
All of them.
Yeah. And I was like, with the crap at football. Yeah. And I think that's sort of how I go at it. Well, I'm the manager.
You take it very seriously, don't you?
I know about football.
Yeah.
So this is how we're going to play, and this is it. And then I'm not nervous, because then I'm like, I feel like I could sit with any ex-player and talk about football, even though they think I can't. I just think football, that's my safe space. And I was just like, I don't really care if you have got 10 million followers in America.
If you're not tracking back,
you're being subbed off. You're off. You were rubbish. You're not going back on, So, but obviously that didn't happen, because you've got to give them a bit of game time. But I really enjoyed it. I think it's a fantastic event. And again, it's a glimpse to what the football life must be, because, when you book into the hotel, you go into your room, there's a few little gifts. It's down in the lobby for breakfast, and then it's onto the bus, and then we've got to go and do this. I just loved that organisation. It's amazing. And
in terms of the actual team talk, because I remember it, especially the first one being quite infamous, that got shared on social media. That moment you're doing the team talk, is that something you prepare? Are you buzzing off that? Are you a bit nervous?
I think the first one was better because I didn't really know I was going to do that. I completely missed the plot. So I did that one. Right. The second one, I sort of tried. I'd been preparing it in the week, and that's the worst thing you can do, because I can't remember a speech. So I was sort of like, I've got to go this bit. And it wasn't as good, but I think if I ever got a chance again, I'd just do it off the cuff. That's great. I love it. Yeah.
Best and worst player that you've managed at one of the games?
I think Noah Beck is the best
player.
Yeah.
Baller.
Year one, which is probably why I wasn't there in year two. Worst player is really hard, because people are just going to say it was the goalkeepers. But I think what I will say is both goalkeepers did their best.
Yeah, fair enough.
But if we'd had KSI in goal, we'd have won second year.
Okay.
I think if you're going to have goalkeepers that haven't played the game before, the other one's got to have it as well.
Just to make it fair.
Yeah,
I get that. Most talented YouTuber, because obviously you've been in that dressing room with some of the most creative people in the space. Is there one person you look at? Because you must have idols. I haven't asked about your idols in the space and people that you look up to. Who do you think is the most creative or talented person in that space? Or is there one person that you look up to and go, oh, that person's content I absolutely love?
I think for me, what I do in the football space is a bit different to what they do. I'm obviously a lot older than them, but I do have a great admiration for the people who have started off as nothing and then built something massive. And I know it's a very easy answer, but I think when you look at people like the Sidemen and the Beta Squad, It's amazing what they've done.
Yeah.
Because it's just so big. I mean, I actually think they could easily become politicians if they wanted to, and prime ministers, because their followings are so big. And to build that, I saw a picture of the Sidemen the other day, like when they started off. And they're all just little kids.
Then and now.
To what they are now.
Yeah.
And you just think, I mean, obviously, one thing I would say is that everybody has to be successful, you've got to have a great team behind you. It doesn't matter how good you are in front of the camera. But the longevity is something to be respected as well. I was on about this in relation to Salah and Hazard the other day.
Yeah.
People saying who's better, and I said, but you can't take longevity out of it when you're at the top.
Yeah.
And Salah's still going.
Yeah, I saw that as well, actually. And that's a huge debate that's going around at the minute. Give me an idea of the sort of KSI and the Sidemen effect, because I was at the game just watching it, and it sold out West Ham United Stadium. And it's just incredible. Working with them, give us an insight into just the effect of being with them and what they're creating and how special what the Sidemen have built is.
Yeah, I think when you're doing those events, the enormity of what's going on behind the scenes really hits home. The organisation. I mean, the people I probably get on with, people won't know, because they're the people who are involved in the camera work and the production and everything like that. And there's so many people. The actual Sidemen, I mean, I haven't spoken to them that much in 2 years. I mean, they're always really friendly. They always have a bit of a chat with you.
Yeah.
If you sat at the table eating, you can have a very grounded chat. But the enormity of what they are is, I don't think it's lost on anybody.
Yeah, what I would say as well on that, the best thing about the whole thing, the amount of money they raise for charity is phenomenal. So credit to them. Going to end with a bit of a quick fire Man United section. We can't have you on without talking about Man United. Mark Goldbridge's favourite ever Manchester United moment. What are you saying?
So boring. You can guess it. I don't
Go
know
on, the treble, the Champions League.
But it's the
Saw
worst.
it again recently on Beckham's documentary.
Yeah, I loved that documentary.
Yeah.
I mean, Beckham was one of my favourite players, probably my favourite player.
Yeah.
I just remember when he got sent off in '98, I was arguing with everyone.
Yeah.
I mean, for him to talk about how he went through all that for so long, I probably didn't really remember it because I was just so adamantly behind Beckham, as I think a lot of United fans were. But it's boring. It's such a boring answer if you lived through it, because '99 was just won't be topped. It was amazing.
Okay, so that's your moment. You almost answered the next question perfectly, because my next question was favourite ever United player. Is it Beckham or is it someone else?
Be Keane or Beckham.
Yeah.
Roy Keane was... I liked Roy Keane because obviously living in Nottingham, we used to get the Evening Post. So the only teams you could read about were Forest and Notts County and Mansfield.
Right.
And I'd just read anything about football. And I just remember reading about this guy from Co-Bramblers who cost 16,000.
Yeah.
I think he made his debut away against Liverpool. And then when Forest got relegated, he went to Man United. So I was just like, it felt like it was a homegrown talent going to my club. So, and I just loved the way he played the game. I loved the engine of Roy Keane. But then David Beckham, the two contrasts really, they were the two players, Roy Keane and David Beckham. David Beckham was sort of like this guy who had wanted to copy his hair and wear his boots and everything like that, whereas Roy Keane was a proper powerhouse leader.
Worst Man United moment?
I think it would have to be the Aguero moment. I was refusing to watch that game because they were playing QPR and they were going to win, and I was like, I'm not going to watch it. And then my mate messaged me and said they're losing to QPR. I said, I'm not watching it. And he was like, but they're not even playing well. Remember, Man City need to win. So I whacked it on in the second half and I watched it, and the minutes are going down, and I'm like, I still think they'll do it. And then it hit 90 minutes, and I was like, well, they've got to score 2 goals. And then obviously Dzeko scored, and I was just like, it went Aguero. I literally turned the TV off, and I don't think I put Sky back on for 3 months.
Wow. What a moment. What a moment for City fans, not for you though. Thoughts on United this season? Maybe not quick fire this, but what are your thoughts on everything that's going on at Man United this season?
I think the club's in general trouble. I mean, the great thing about the United stand growing is that you do sort of grow relationships, and you do, sort of get bits of information. And I mean, not that this is an exclusive, but the club's a mess from top to bottom, and it's nowhere near like your club. Spurs has obviously got a new manager in. It's in a good place. You've got Arsenal.
Looking all right, isn't it, Spurs?
Yeah, looking really good. And I just think Man United are miles off. They're miles off in relation to the squad, the actual club infrastructure. Old Trafford's rusting. Obviously, the Glazers gets mentioned quite a lot. But I just think you look at the way Man City, Newcastle are being run. If you're not being run like that, you're going to struggle.
What are your thoughts on Ten Hag? Because it did finish third last season and won the Carabao Cup. So is he someone that you think is the right man for the future? Because he had a good season last season, didn't he?
Yeah, I really wanted us to get him. And now I back him 100%. I don't think any manager makes every decision right. And I think sometimes you know, that's the job of a fan, isn't it, to call it out? But I do think he's the right guy. I just don't think it's the right circumstances. I'd like to see him given at least some of the resources that Pep's got. And it's not just about spend. It's about, you know, director of football, you know, coaching, recruitment. There's a whole lot of work there. But I think he's the right guy, yeah.
Go on, give us your predictions for this season. How do you see it unfolding? Because also it's worth pointing out, United have been unlucky with injuries as well. That's been a big factor.
I don't see top 4.
Don't you?
Maybe top 6. Yeah.
Top 4 completely gone for you?
I just don't. I think there's 8 or 9 teams better than us at the moment. So even if you chip half away, you're still not top 4.
What's the top 4 in order from champions to 4th, do you think?
Still think Man City, Arsenal, Liverpool, and I'd say Spurs or Newcastle first.
I like that answer, Spurs.
Your thing is whether you can last.
Consistency, yeah. And obviously Spurs have some players that are so key to keep fit.
Yeah.
The likes of Son and Maddison. Mark, it's been brilliant having you on the pod. I just want to know your plans for the future. We've seen United stand grow. You've got your podcast, your show on TalkSport. You know, you're in mainstream, but you've also kept your roots as well. Where would you like to see Mark Goldbridge, the entity, in sort of 5-10 years? What's coming up? Anything you can tell us?
I think when you're doing this and you see some people who've done this and they drop off or fall off or whatever you want to, you never know. You never know. And somebody said that to me a few years ago. They said your next statement could be your last. You never know. Are
you concerned about that then?
Well, I think I'm quite good at it. I think there's enough people out there that would love to take me down, and I think I'm one of the best, without blowing my own trumpet, at not doing that. But especially when you're doing live content, one slip of the tongue and you're gone. But it is quite monotonous. It does have quite a big mental strain. It's really behind the camera. There's a lot that goes on that's quite draining. So for me, I try and do things now that, even things like this, you know, just go down to London and do a podcast. So I'm always looking at projects now because I'm in a position where I can, where it's sort of like, what can I get out of that? You know, how am I going to enjoy that? And I think that's what I'd like to be doing over the next 5 years. There's loads of things that I would like to do. And it's about balancing that against what I do at the moment, which is very time consuming. Yeah,
you mentioned time consuming. Obviously, you've got a family, young families, and you've got kids now that see your content. I mean, you said earlier that one of your kids alerted you to one of your virals on TikTok, which is amazing. Does that bring its own challenges as well? When you're doing a live stream, do you have to think, oh, my kids will be watching this? Or does that come into your psyche at all?
Well, my oldest are girls, and then I've got Seb, who's 6, who the other day came in when I was doing an EAFC game.
Right.
And I'd forgotten he was in the room, and I conceded a goal against Chelsea, and I went, and then I saw him out the corner of my eye, and
Really?
I was like, woo. And he went, yeah, that was not a good goal to concede. So he's actually the first one who's starting to take an interest in what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, maybe there's an heir to the throne there.
Yeah. Is that the next Mark Goldbridge?
He might be. He's got a very unique personality. Definitely has my sarcasm and winding up nature. So
like that.
But I don't know. Can you know? It's a bit like I admire like Rooney's kid Kai, who's banging in the goals, and it's just like, how do you have a player like that and then potentially produce another one like that? Because I look at it and I go, I could not recreate what I am to Seb because, you know, all those games I watched, all those, you know, living room football, Sabutio, it created this. And, you know, I think ultimately if you've got kids, you want them to be unique and do their own thing. I wouldn't advise him to do this anyway.
Do you have a proudest moment, one thing that you're most happy about, or one moment in your journey that stands out?
I think there's bucket list things, like playing at Old Trafford was just, no one can take that away from me. Even like managing in front of 60,000 fans, no one can take that away. Doing a radio show, no one can take that away. But I think actually the most proud thing, and I feel like a bit like David Brent with the charity thing here.
Go on.
Is I do a stream every year in the November international break where I just stream all day. I'll play FIFA or whatever. And over 3 years, we've raised 100 grand for Marie Curie. And I lost a friend with cancer who left 3 young kids behind a few years ago. And that's why I started doing it. And I think having the opportunity to do something like that, they're the things that matter, aren't they?
Brilliant, mate. Well said. And I think that's a brilliant note to end it. Before we do end, we always ask this: advice for people wanting to become the next you, or going into following your footsteps, or go into this industry. What advice would you have, or best bit of advice that you've been told that you can pass on?
I think, first of all, the biggest cliche is hard work. But I think you're either lucky or you're not. You know, obviously I'm talented. That sounds really arrogant, but obviously I have a talent that people want to watch, but it's natural. Don't go copying other people. Just be yourself. And ultimately, the reason I say that is because I wanted to be a professional footballer. That's all I ever wanted to be. And I'm not because I wasn't good enough. So I think as long as you're true to yourself, then that's the best advice I can give. And if you don't make it, then you'll find another niche like I did.
Mark, brilliant to have you on. Did we cover everything? I think we got
so.
through a lot.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I know that you took a train all the way down to be a very busy man, so much appreciated. And I thought it was a brilliant episode. Thank you, mate.
No, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.